Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Ruari Quinn, former Minister for Education and Skills of the Republic of Ireland and former leader of the Labour Party of Ireland. Mr. Nemi Mangia, former Minister for Education of Haiti, Chair of Governance, Ethics, Risk and Finance of the Committee for Global Partnerships for Education. Your Excellencies, Ambassadors, High Commissioners and other members of the diplomatic community, members of the University Executive and Senior Management, Deans of Faculties, and a particular warm welcome to the Dean of the Faculty of Education, University of Pretoria colleagues and colleagues from other universities, honoured guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is my signal pleasure to welcome you to the Kapuscinski Development Lecture 2016 on behalf of the Vice-Chancellor and Principal of the University of Pretoria, Professor Cheryl Delaray. Unfortunately, the Vice-Chancellor could not open this evening's event to welcome you herself. I know that she was looking forward to this opportunity, but the events beyond her control meant that she could not be here this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, please note that this evening's lectures, organized under the rubric Education Fundamental to a Country's Future, is a joint initiative of the European Commission, the United Nations Development Programme, and the University of Pretoria. Furthermore, the initiative is funded by the European Commission. For first-time visitors to the University of Pretoria, allow me to provide you with some contextual information about the university. Established in 1908, the University of Pretoria has 9 faculties and a business school. These faculties and business school are spread across 5 campuses, with 4 of these campuses in the Greater Tshwane region and one campus in Ilovo, Johannesburg. Furthermore, we currently have approximately 60,000 students enrolled at the University of Pretoria. While for the better part of its 108 years existence, the University of Pretoria has prioritized teaching and learning, and while it will certainly continue to do so, over the past 2 decades at least, it has increasingly also prioritized the strengthening of its research and public intellectual agendas. In view of the value attached to public intellectual activity, we are therefore particularly pleased that the Kapuscinski Development Lecture 2016 is taking place at the University of Pretoria. Given the various difficulties, ladies and gentlemen, highlighted by recent events in the education sector in South Africa, including the higher education sector, this evening's lectures, as far as the University of Pretoria is concerned, could not have come at a better time. As many of you will know, the issues that will be raised in the lectures here this evening have become topics of sustained public debate. These include issues of curriculum transformation, the need to reconceptualize our modes of teaching, the link between education and employability, and the pressing need to extend teaching and learning beyond the classroom walls. These issues have been placed high on the University of Pretoria's agenda, and it is for this reason that I look particularly forward to this evening's lectures. The University of Pretoria wishes to thank the European Commission and the United Nations Development Programme for having invited us to collaborate in respect of this evening's event. Ladies and gentlemen, at this point it is my privilege to call Ambassador Marcus Canaro, head of the delegation of the EU diplomatic mission to South Africa, to the podium. Ambassador Marcus Canaro will welcome you on behalf of the European Commission and the United Nations Development Programme. I thank you for your attention.
Good evening, all. How wonderful to be in front of a packed audience here and picking up on Professor Duncan's welcoming remark, and what an honor and great pleasure for me to be here and opening this Kapuscinski's Development Lectures. And as you have already heard, this is testimony of what indeed is an excellent collaboration between ourselves, the European Commission, and the United Nations Development Programme, but also a special thank here to the Professor and Vice Principal Norman Duncan for also an excellent collaboration we have with the university on many occasions. And if I look to the right also, I'm supposed not to mention Minister Pandor's presence here, but as an alumni, I think, of this august university, I think it's great to have you here. And alumni is something that the university is very proud of gathering. I've seen the hashtags on the recent record reached coming in. I would also like to welcome specifically at this lecture Mr. Warry Quinn and Mr. Nesmi Manigat. You will hear them as guest speakers, both renowned in their own rights and important actors on the theme of education, both in their respective countries, but also in the global debates. They participate in a prestigious series of lectures that the European Commission is proud of to have been and continues to be very closely associated. A few words then on the Kapuscinski Lecture. Since their inception in 2009, there have been over 80 lectures, and it has been particularly gratifying to observe that their popularity has grown significantly. Anyone going into the hashtags, you would see the track record of that. 2015-2016 was designated as the European Year for Development, and first a theme dealing with external actions of the European Union, and again the Kapuscinski lectures have been instrumental of bringing the wider theme of development from a European Union perspective to the world. We have through that been able to provide an unprecedented window to put the spotlight on the role of the European Union as a global actor, and in particular on international cooperation and development policy. As one of the flagships event of the year, one special Kapuscinski Development Lectures was organized, in fact, on each of the 28 member states, and including recently also one in Cape Town. I'm very glad that this can bring this event here to Pretoria. Events which, as this audience testifies, provides students, academics, NGOs, media, EU member states and partners with the unique opportunity to discuss increasingly relevant issues and explore answers to raised questions. The lectures honors a certain Richard Kapuscinski, a talented Polish journalist and writer, famous throughout the world for his insights into development issues and challenges, and who sadly passed away in 2007. Kapuscinski, whose books were translated into numerous languages, was often named the Third World Chronicler, or the voice of the poor, for his famous reportages and books describing developing countries on all continents. He started in 1956 and wrote throughout 2006. He belongs to the category of reporters who, through their work, have gained almost universal recognition from their peers. One of his quotes said, "Life is truly known only to those who suffer, those who lose, endure adversity, and stumble from defeat to defeat." And this is what he put into his prose, into his books. In today's context, the words solidarity and partnership are more relevant than ever, and not only for moral reasons, but also as a strategic imperative for the future. We live in a world where we are all interconnected and where the challenges are global. Evidently, trade, education, vocational training, climate change, security, migration, human development, just to name a few of the many complex aspects in a changing world, and a world which also forces us to change with it. 2015 has been a critical year for development. I will not go into detail of the Addis Ababa Action Plan and the 2030 Agenda on Sustainable Development and the COP21 in Paris, except for singling out that this has been a tremendous opportunity, but also a major challenge now to look at the world in a new framework. And one of the Sustainable Development Goals will be referred to, I'm sure, more often in the discussion today. That is the goal number 4, which targets quality education, with the ambition to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. And this also happens to be a priority of EU cooperation in education with partner countries, and notably in our cooperation with South Africa. In South Africa, the focus is on higher education, notably through the Erasmus Plus program, I'm sure many in the university here are familiar with, on teaching and learning development, and potentially on other aspects such as early childhood education, inclusive education, and school health. The important thing here for me to leave with you in the audience is that with South African education, our cooperation goes beyond the programming funding. It's based on the strength of our strategic partnership, and our relations are more about dialogue and sharing of practices, and notably looking at connecting issues of education, of broader skills, of employability and entrepreneurship. With a growing world population, new challenges need to be taken into consideration in the design of education policies. Education, as we will hear, is more than just reading, just writing, and arithmetics. It is one of the most effective ways of reducing poverty and inequality, and one of the most effective ways of improving people's lives. It can contribute to greater employability, boost economic growth, promote gender equality and human rights, and also to contribute to building peaceful societies. So with these words, I'm just honored to be here in front of a packed audience, and I'm very honored to present you what is a formidable panel to this edition of the Kapuscinski Development Lecture. And happy to pass back to Professor Duncan, or to yourselves as Master of Ceremonies. Please.
Thank you very much. And finally, on behalf of UNDP, I'd like to thank the European Commission for cooperating with us and organizing these lectures since 2009, and particularly the University of Pretoria for hosting the event here. As one of our speakers said at one of the previous lectures, that these lectures should actually sometimes challenge the conventional wisdom on development, and I think the university is a perfect place to for such critical thinking, actually, and going beyond the mainstream thinking and operations that we are proceeding. Today's lecture is live streamed, and you're encouraged as well, you sitting here, but also our online audience, to put your comments or questions to our noble speakers through Twitter using the CapTalks hashtag. You have it on the screen, CapTalks, and you're happy to interact and use the opportunity to ask questions to such interesting speakers as we have today. It's a unique opportunity to have two former education ministers of two different countries, of course, to have different perspectives from Haiti and Ireland. So I encourage you very much to use this opportunity also to speak to them. And particularly this topic is interesting, maybe even more than other development topics, since education is such an important ground for development. Let me briefly introduce our speakers. Mr. Nesmi Maninga is the former Minister of National Education and Professional Training of Haiti, and he currently holds a position of a chair of Governance, Ethics, Risk and Finance Committee of the Global Partnership for Education. Mr. Ruari Quinn has been led the Labour Party of Ireland for 5 years, between 1997 and 2002, and among other ministerial functions, he was as well the Minister for Education and Skills between 2011 and 2014. So we have, again, a unique opportunity to hear two very probably different and interesting, enriching perspectives on the role of education in development. Thank you very much, and I'd like to welcome our first speaker, Mr. Maninga.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, today is a great day for me, not just because the first time I'm visiting South Africa, but because it's the first time I will do an entire speech in English. Thank you to the organizers. Be patient with my accent also. I would first of all like to thank the organizers of the Kapuscinski Development Lectures, the United Nations Programme for Development, the European Commission, as well as the directors and administrators of the University of Pretoria for the invitation. I would also like to take this opportunity to commend the important contribution of the Kapuscinski Development Lecture, its partners, and all speakers who have taken part in these debates as a means of advancing the development agenda of a more inclusive and prosperous world. Please accept my gratitude for the cordial reception extended to me. Today's question is an essential one. Can education make a difference in employability in a country's development? We will not be able to approach all the elements such as an important and complex subject, but the answer is certainly yes. Provided that the school and education system are reformed just as it would be in the labor market. Indeed, more and more, we live in an interconnected world, and it's becoming increasingly important to build together the solution which have a durable impact for the future of the world country. Although public decision makers, thinkers, and various leaders have for many years admitted to the danger of one-track thinking, there remains the trap of a singular approach which consists in producing optimal solutions limited to our own environment. But the world of today is not only interconnected, it is also complex and changing. Immigration, urbanization, information technology, the rejuvenation of the population in developing countries are phenomena that upset our traditional institutions, schools in particular. Nowadays, the mission school set a final of step with the dynamic world, populated more and more by young who live in longer than ever before. Gone this era where people spent 25 years of their life acquiring knowledge and skills, and the following 25 years maintaining their skill sets and working. It's gone. In today's world, diplomas and degrees, all those things come with an expiration date and quickly become obsolete. I used to say to my university students, the new jobs of today and tomorrow perhaps doesn't exist yet. It's up to you to create them. And what is better to do so in a collaborative way? In today's fast-paced and dynamic society, school can no longer limit itself in transmitting static knowledge to future workers who will be equally reactive. The guarantee of lifelong employment is dead. Long live employability. In the 21st century, the challenge for our school is to transmit a culture of training to future workers, professionals, mobile entrepreneurs, engage in the development of their community, but more generally of the region. Can this be done simply by massive investment in basic education? That's the question. Can this be done simply by massive investment in basic education? What types of alternative training is available for young people who have not completed the primary cycle? What should our role be in early childhood? A fundamental stage in the future development of certain cross-curricular skills, social, psychosocial. Should education simply undergo such changes? Or gradually adapt it? Or should it bring on this adjustment? What do we stand today? Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests. Exactly 20 years ago, since the Summit of Education in Chongqing in 1996, developing countries made a commitment to basic education at the primary level. We must, of course, admit that much progress has been made. everywhere. Net enrollment rates have progressed at the primary school level. Although we speak, there are still 58 million school-age children who do not go to school. Nonetheless, we must take a second look at the all-primary strategy. In other words, can basic education make a difference in employability and national development? Certain studies that are already available suggest that the lower the investment at the early childhood level, the more dropout rate and grade repetition on the primary level will be elevated. The same should be applied in the case of secondary and university level education. In many countries, school teachers have only a secondary school education and very few have university degrees. Today, 250 million children, whether enrolled in school or not, are effectively unable to read nor write. Thus, it is not by chance 71 million teenagers are not enrolled in secondary school. In addition to that, the demographic bonus in several countries is about to turn in demographic bomb if there is not also a major investment in secondary education, especially in vocational training. Indeed, a high number of countries face this demographic bomb as its timer is thinking. This bomb is called exclusion, youth unemployment, insecurity and crime, kidnapping, prostitution, drugs, rural dispopulation, and mass migration. It is clear that no country can claim to have any future at all if millions of young people are deprived of the essential skills needed to find a job or to create their own employment through their active life. 40 to 50% of young people living in developing countries currently find themselves out of schools. In certain countries, the situation is worse. On my home country, Haiti, only we have 25, let's say 30 of teenagers in secondary school. This is a recipe for disaster. Ladies and gentlemen, can education make a difference in employability, in national development? Yes. But all the measures needed to ensure this reality, I will mention 4. First of all, we're establishing a balance in investment between education levels. It is clear that education suffers from a chronic deficit in investment. According to UNESCO estimate, it would be now necessary to spend $22 billion per year, more than what is currently being spent to fund education for all 2030. Though it is generally recommended that 20% of national budget be allocated to education, but no recommendation at all are made as to the distribution of such funds. However, no matter the amount mobilized, what should not be overlooked is the principle of mutual enrichment for our level of education. An optimal investment in all education channels, from preschool to university, represent a greater guarantee for employability. While, of course, keeping in mind vocational training alternative for those young who have not completed the primary education cycle. In my country, a lot of countries, in Latin America and Caribbean countries, it's very difficult to find budget to fund higher education, to fund secondary education. Even the donors doesn't want to. All the focus is only on primary education, not on early childhood. This is a serious problem. The Incheon Declaration must be more and more than wishful thinking when it proposes 12 years of quality primary and secondary education that is free and equitable, publicly funded, and at least 9 years of which are compulsory and that provide relevant knowledge and skills. Furthermore, it encourages the inclusion of at least 1 year of quality, free, and compulsory pre-primary education and access for all children to quality early childhood. The budget allocated for secondary education through higher education must clearly manifest this will to grant special focus to young people. This rebalancing will certainly represent a major paradigm shift from current policies, which requires for developing countries, to take the significant investment only on primary education. Point 2, emphasizing cross-curricular skills. To reform national education system so that they prepare the emerging generation of thinkers, visionaries, reformers, critics, scientists, professionals on all levels, surpass the simple framework of transferring subject-specific competencies. Knowing how to learn on one's own, knowing how to solve problems, working in teams, starting up one's own business, selling, communicating one's idea, knowing how to engage in development of our own neighborhood, our own country, are among the new key skills. Those are critical to get a job, to create their own job. This effort aims at getting a new generation that is motivated and will find the conditions necessary to remain in their country and take part in the progress of its times. This requires re-engineering of content, the content of school, and the content of school time also, while finding a delicate, critical, important balance, complementary between subject-specific competencies and cross-curricular competencies. To do this, we must reform the secondary education system, including technical and professional education and training, in order to better prepare young people for life and work in a world that now is fully in the throes of complete and rapid transformation. Education system may be better equipped to offer a set of generic basic skills that are very practical, such as entrepreneurship, information technology, and education for citizenship, all those content that now are really be teaching in our classroom. And we need to teach the teachers, the new generation of teachers, how to get those skills and to teach it also. Point 3. Replacing or just placing schools at the center of the village, the center of the neighborhood. Giving young people the capacity to take an active and effective part in the future of the community or the country or the region requires the creation of strong linkage and networks between schools and communities. Training, even lifelong trainings, is not enough. School must no longer remain under public governance. School must migrate under citizen governance. Considering the rigidness of the labor markets, governed by bureaucracies and rules that often are obsolete. The time has come to develop bonds, make it impossible to create consensus toward minimizing the various barriers usually encountered. Partnership between school and chamber of commerce, schools and trade council schools, schools and businesses, schools and NGOs should be promoted. It does become important to do well in anticipating the evolution of current and future trends, while at the same time helping education system be more tuned to the needs of realities of the world of economics. Because most of the time, teachers like me, we can be trapped in the bubble of the university. We have to go outside and feel the real ride. It is a win-win situation because the next century is already under construction day by day in our classroom. Moreover, it's becoming increasingly imperative to involve the family, public authorities, the media, and civil society in the work of transmitting cultural heritage and key values to our youth. To address the current and future challenges of peace, prosperity, public health, environment, climate change, education system can no longer be locked in traditional concept of schooling. The learning environment must go beyond the classroom and mobilize other key actors. Gradually, we must tear down the walls of our classroom to better facilitate re-engineering of curricula, guarantee the quality and especially the relevance of education, the mobilization of innovative and targeted funding, especially at the secondary level, sources particularly from businesses. Last point. Making higher education work for the entire education chain. Ladies and gentlemen, I was privileged to observe the education system in many countries, in various capacities. As a university professor, technical assistant, as director of a non-profit organization, as Minister of Education, and now as I sit as the board of the Global Partnership for Education. All of this has led me to conclude that schools, as much as the world's religion, are institutions that is very hard to reform. No one can question school's mission without engaging, whether willingly or not, in a battle against traditions, conventional wisdom, even dogma. This is why I do not expect what I am about to say to be very popular. But nonetheless, it is clear that higher education should be today in search of new meaning. Without a doubt, higher education has made some progress, as is now available to 30% of young people globally, compared to 15 just 20 years ago. Even though in some countries, only in my country, even 5% are enrolled. Too few young people earn degrees. Too few degrees provide real skills to the labor market. We have to change that. It's our responsibility. Add to the fact that 40% of young people worldwide are not enrolled at secondary level, causing me to ask myself and to ask you these three questions. Who is preparing the majority of youth aged 15 and 24 for active life, including those who drop out of primary school? Who is doing the real work to prevent academic failure among those who are sitting in the classroom? Who better than academics and higher education has the necessary knowledge and skills and is better able to develop them to fulfill this need? Therefore, if higher education must reinforce itself to increase graduation rates, the time has come for it to play a more active role in supporting job creation for a larger public. To do this, it must get involved in curricular reform from the outset at the early childhood, in large-scale initial training and continuing education for school principals, teachers, and school administrators. Higher education should also supplement the gaps in technical and vocational education and training and make it a new sector for education activity. This includes partnership, training, certifying the skill of those who stop the schooling very early. This also includes support for businesses, incubators, especially for sectors requiring innovations in technology. No sectors better than university can do that. So placing higher education and other fields in the service of the entire education chain is one way to efficiently enhance the employability of young people and to guarantee employment for the future. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, in conclusion, let us remember the old African adage. It takes a whole village to raise a child. And please, allow me to add today, it takes a whole village to young people to get a job and create their own employment. Thank you.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, Marcus Cornoro, and my colleague, Mr. Mesme Maniet, I hope I haven't destroyed the pronunciation of all of your names, but I'm very pleased to be in your company. I'm very pleased to be here with you on this evening to talk about a subject that is of great interest, I think, to most people in the room. I want to tell you at the outset that I have been honoured to deliver this year's Kapuscinski's Lecture. And I sincerely hope that I will be able to live up to the high standards which my distinguished predecessors have already set. Richard Kapuscinski was a brilliant journalist and an extraordinary writer who could interpret the winds of change while being at the centre of the storm. Since he died in 2007, the global weather pattern has not improved. If anything, it has become much more unpredictable and extreme. Yet we need to be continued to explore and examine the social and political changes which, with characteristic indifference to our level of experience and preparedness, continue to take us all by surprise. We are not the first generation to encounter this experience, but we ourselves are living through it for the first time. My country, Ireland, is currently exploring a decade of commemorations from 1913 to 1923. This year is the centenary of the 1916 insurrection, which erupted on Easter Monday in Dublin, then the second city of the British Empire. Britain had been at war since August 1914, and the Irish Rebellion, which lasted for only 7 days, was seen by the vast majority of Irish people as a stab in the back. It was perceived at that time as an act of unrepresentative treachery by less than 1,000 rebels against the thousands of Irish soldiers fighting in France against Germany for the rights of small nations such as Belgium and Ireland. Yet within 7 years, the political landscape was utterly transformed. A new independent Irish Free State emerged, but it did not include all of the island of Ireland. Indeed, the very name of the new state, which the London government allowed the Irish nationalists to use, was taken from this part of the empire, which had incorporated the Boer Orange Republic as a free state. Back then, hard to think about it now, but back then, Imperial Britain and her political leaders could not even let the word republic pass their lips, lest it challenge the very orthodoxy of empire and monarchy. The dynamics of political change, as we continue to observe or even experience, do not wait for those who hope for a return to the status quo, who find political change difficult to understand and even harder to accept. From Kapuscinski's travels and his writings, it seems clear to me that he had a unique insight into the culture of education. In times of strong political change, or indeed devastating social transition, what else remains? And what needs to be redefined? Sometimes change comes from within, as in the new independent Irish state in the 1920s, or indeed post-apartheid South Africa at the end of the last century. Social change can also be delivered by the emergence of new inventions or transformative technologies. These enable age-old systems of transforming and storing knowledge to be completely changed. For example, in many universities around the world today, paper-based communications between lecturers and students outside the classroom concerning the delivery of a particular course have now all been replaced electronically by the widespread use of the internet and interactive whiteboards. We are at a situation now where the new technology of flipped classrooms, tablets and smartphones, e-portfolios and all of these and much more are beginning to increase in prevalence in the learning environments of the world. I'm quite sure you believe with me that technology can be used to increase access to education, to share wonderful resources between teachers in different corners of the world, and to help prepare students for the world with which they will face their life later. Yet to my mind, there are two questions we must continue to ask ourselves when we embrace the use of technology. Firstly, do our students have access to the knowledge, have access to the technology, that technology in an equitable manner? And secondly, are we using evidence-based approaches to combine excellent teaching with the use of the technology? None of us would argue that digital technology has already transformed our workplace. In seeking to leverage the same technologies to enhance learning, we must ensure that we do not indeed widen inequality in our societies, and we must remember that technology may assist with high quality teaching, but it can never replace high quality teaching. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm conscious in this part of the world that learning and teaching go right back thousands of years to this very continent of Africa, where we are told by archaeologists and scientists that modern humanity first emerged. From this part of our world, primitive human beings, our very own ancestors, developed and explored the rest of planet Earth. It is clear to me that learning was the first part of understanding, so that the knowledge acquired could be stored and transmitted to succeeding generations in order that they actually survived. Today, our methods and equipment are completely different, but our motivation and our patience as teachers and students are essentially the same. There is, throughout our education system, including in higher education, the words research is increasingly important, but critical thinking, guided by innovative and skilled teachers, is vital in a world that is rapidly changing. Our higher education systems must prepare people to participate fully within the dynamic and evolving education and labour environment. Education quality was listed fourth among the 17 Sustainable Development Goals in education for 2030. The Anxion Declaration, which was proclaimed at the World Education Forum in 2015 in the Republic of Korea, was the climax for that particular exercise. Over 600 participants from 160 countries, including 120 ministries, heads and members of delegations, heads of agencies and officials of multilateral and bilateral organizations, and representatives of civil society, the teaching professions, youth, the private sector, adopted the Anxion Declaration for Education in 2030, which sets out for a new vision for education for the next 15 years. I want to tell you that I am very supportive of the concept of the development goals and the aspirations which they properly contain. There are, however, in every country, different levels of education attainment, even between countries of similar economic and cultural development. Having considered this over a number of years, I've come to a conclusion that the key component which explains these differences amongst countries of similar economic and social background, the key components that explains this difference are the following: the qualifications, the social status, the quality of the teacher skills, and the commitment of the teacher. I'll repeat them because for me they're very, very central in my experience. You could have two countries, Canada and America, Scotland and Wales, just to name two from my own backyard, so to speak, with very, very different outcomes. And when you ask people what are the reasons for the outcomes, it comes down to the qualifications of the teachers, the social status, the quality of teacher skills, and the commitment of teachers. Now, some of this goes back a long time, and accordingly, this can't be replicated very quickly in new and emerging countries. However, in my view, where these factors are absent, then sustained efforts over time should be undertaken by the relevant authorities and the wider population to build or even strengthen them at all levels in the education system, from the preschool period right through to third and fourth level. And this includes also parents and grandparents, community groups, school patrons, including local government authorities, as well as teacher training colleges and the teachers' unions themselves. All the players listed above, and civil society generally, have had a great role to play in the past in creating and sustaining the effectiveness of teaching in educationally successful countries, which I have mentioned. The existing strong culture of education must not be taken for granted in those countries. Where that culture is weak or has become weak, or it is fraught with conflicting tensions between different actors, then education leaders, including the Ministers for Education and the Department of Education, should act to restore the system to its previous strength. They could start, first of all, by recognising that the issues are real and must be addressed before changes in the curriculum, the assessment system, examination regime, or teacher training issues are resolved. The existing landscape of learning must be prepared so that a culture of education can be properly installed and maintained over decades in education right up until 2030. There are no quick fixes in this particularly precious world. The goals set for Education 2030 are important, and mobilising of resources and strengths and commitment to reach them is important. But they should be seen more as a staging post along the route, which is by its very nature open-ended. Here in South Africa, your efforts to improve education and training resonate with many other countries around the world, including Ireland. Like you, we have a burgeoning youth population in Ireland, which is both a challenge and indeed an opportunity. Meeting that challenge is particularly difficult at a time of economic constraints, such as occurred in Ireland when we had to be bailed out by the IMF because we had lost our economic sovereignty due to the political irresponsibility of our predecessors. And that was over 6 years ago, and we are slowly making our way back. The austerity measures, which we had to introduce, were tough on all of our citizens. Recruitment for staff in many cases of the public service, such as nursing, was effectively halted. And the government, but even at that point in time, the government exempted primary and secondary schools where additional teachers were hired to cater for the increasing school rolls. While we shielded education as best we could from the worst cuts, we also recognised that we had to reform the system so that our young people would leave school better prepared for a world where teaching is transforming our lives at an accelerating pace. A rapidly rising labour market can leave disadvantaged young people behind, especially in times of recession. In Ireland, we are concerned, as you all are, with the phenomenon of NEETs, not in neither education or training skills. In other words, doing nothing except driving their parents mad by lying in bed half the day. Those of you who've had that experience, and then not coming home at night. But not in employment, not in education, not in training. That's sadly the place for a lot of people in different parts of the world. And I've had to live through it as Minister for Education. And we started to put together to ourselves to ask the questions, what are the reasons behind the huge numbers of this category? It wasn't always so. Is it because the traditional jobs that had been available to early school leavers are no longer as readily available? Or is it also because so many young people remain in school to little benefit as they have simply stopped engaging with the schooling system and are more likely to end up with low or no qualifications whatsoever? I don't have any explanations for what the reasons are in your part of the world, but they have been studied scientifically in Ireland, and I'll give you a summary of the results. In Ireland, under the Economic Social Research Institute, research was shown that the predominantly academic curriculum of secondary schools has resulted in many 13 and 14-year-old schoolboys and girls literally switching off for a variety of reasons. These include a weak educational commitment in the home, disinterest or boredom among a young student in the classroom, or a disconnect with the relevance of the curriculum subjects to the life expectations of the young person and of his or her school group. This youth cohort in Ireland, according to those studies and to objective evidence that we have, is sadly destined to prolonged periods of unemployment for many, poorly paid short-period jobs of semi-skilled work, and an overall sense of alienation. This, in turn, can lead to a life of drugs and crime, or increasingly in Ireland and elsewhere in Europe, to antagonism to foreign migrant workers who appear to be excluding them from the local labour markets. It's my strong opinion that our education system needs to move into an educational and training area which is also about learning by doing. Not learning by remembering, learning by doing. This collective group work, under supervision with trainers and teachers and doing active projects with completed outcomes, is more engaging for the participants than the present predominantly academic system in Ireland. It is no coincidence that, in my view, the countries in the European Union that have the lowest levels of youth unemployment are those countries that have evolved the German divided programme of vocational and academic education, whereby people can start apprenticeship road to full engagement and full education without any sense of being second-class citizens. And that model, which caters for 220 different apprenticeships and can be found in the German cultural zone of Europe, Denmark, parts of Lower Sweden, Czechoslovakia, Czech Republic, and Austria. That whole area has that tradition. And as a consequence, youth unemployment, male and female, is less than half what it is for the other countries. That's one that can't be culturally lifted up and dropped into another place. I don't think that's right there. But we do have to recognise that the academic route that has now filtered back into our 15-year-old junior certificate examination and informs the outcomes of results for the 18-year-old leaving certificate examination is wonderful for those who know how to navigate it, but it simply abandons those people who don't like it and who don't particularly care for it. I want to come to a close because I think I've spoken longer than I was intended to speak, and to come back here to South Africa and to the rest of the world. In my time, just under 3.5 years as Minister for Education and Skills and 4 years in opposition, chasing it and training it and trying to catch up on it, came to a number of conclusions that are essential and in a way are eternal. Eternal in terms of what year or what century they apply, and eternal in ways that are irrelevant to the level of economic well-being in the household. For me, a very important part of Education to 2030 is gender equality. In Ireland, which has a well-established and an old school system, public school system, we still have a significant minority of primary and post-primary schools which remain single-sex institutions. These typically are more than 50 years old. In contrast, all new schools built by the state are automatically co-ed, but these are just after the Second World War or just before it. And they are a marked contrast to the new schools. The old schools, for example, will typically, where they're in inner parts of the cities and where an amalgamation makes sense for all concerned, where the range of topics and subject matter would be broader by definition of doubling the school numbers in nominal terms, comes into extraordinary resistance. I should tell you that efforts to bring about schools amalgamations in old established communities have been met sometimes with strong parental opposition. For some who may themselves been past pupils in the affected school, sentiment and nostalgia cover a strongly held view, strongly held still even to this day, that girls will do better academically if boys are not present in the classroom. You could make the case the other way around as well, but either way, that is a view that in my part of the world, which is progressive on a number of fronts, still has that attitude. How do we overcome it? Leadership from the patron and the board of management, as well as all the parents in both schools, is a critical component of any progress that can be made in this area. The incentives to help bring that about are the attractions of a greater range of subjects and better teaching resources that can be used. The gender gap challenge in Ireland means an important one, but quite frankly, on this continent in particular, it pales into insignificance when compared to the challenge facing the development world. Plan International estimates that more than 62 million girls around the world are not even in school. 62 million, not even in school. These girls are more likely to live in constant poverty, to suffer through child or forced marriages, and are considerably more likely to die during childbirth. Young Malala Yousafzai has inspired us all, not just by telling her own story, but also by reminding us of the absolute necessity that we must attach, the absolute necessity which we must attach to making sure that every girl gets to school and gets the schooling that she deserves. Gender is not the only challenge facing Ireland or indeed the developing world. Many groups are underrepresented in third level school, and this needs to be acknowledged and planned for. And many higher education students and staff are responding to this with creative individual plans and initiatives. These include successful initiatives should be chaired and incorporated across our education system. For example, migration, which is occurring globally on a large scale for a myriad of reasons, and often complex reasons, brings its own challenges. Such initiatives and the community engagement I referred to earlier can help resolve these challenges and thus ensure that all levels of education are seen as welcoming and inclusive spaces and desirable attainments. So let me begin to conclude. Education is deeply ingrained in the Irish people and their psyche, and this is reflected in government policy decisions. Governments see investment in education, training and skills as crucial to economic and social development. The availability of a skilled workforce and a research base is undoubtedly an attraction for foreign direct investment and essential for the development of indigenous industry. Arts and culture flourish amongst a well-educated population, while education also enables people to participate fully in politics and in society. Parents see education as holding out the great prospect for a better future for their children. In Ireland, parents have a major role in the operation of the school, both by right and by tradition. Where parental engagement is strongest, this is usually because of the active encouragement of the school principal. I should say that it is possible to ensure that the parents are involved in the operation of the school and by extension the wider community, then if that is possible, I would strongly recommend that it be adopted in every country, particularly where it is weak at present. The social engagement of the community in the life of the school and work of the school is, where it is possible, absolutely a great addition to the school and the community which it serves. And all I can say by sharing this with you, we have had this, a vandalised school is a rarity in Ireland, a rarity. A school is a sacred place and is frequently referred. Sadly, that is not the experience that other people have. Another value that's synonymous with Finland. Finland, educationally, is a very successful country, and it has an incredibly strong level of parental and community involvement, which works for the benefit of all those involved, particularly the principal and the other teachers. The wider community can provide work experience for students, as well as hands-on career and social guidance. And they are at the perimeter of the school, helping those kids who can't find it easy to learn in the traditional way. Somebody will come along and help them to fix a boat or to get on with what it is that does interest them. One area where we have sought to leverage such parental and community engagement over recent years is in tackling the scourge of bullying amongst children and young people. Some argue that bullying has always occurred and that bullying experiences build resilience amongst young people. But this viewpoint disregards the nature and the impact of bullying on young people. It disregards the fact that much bullying is identity-based and further marginalises children and young people who most need their support. LGBT children, children from different ethnic minorities, and children with disabilities are all the more likely to be bullied, according to research. And bullying has a greater impact upon these same groups of young people. They are more likely to suffer from low morale, from depression, to disengage from education, and, most tragically, to engage in suicidal behaviour. We can no longer look upon bullying as a natural part of childhood. We must recognise that it reflects very real hurt. Upon children and young people, and it can be prevented. School culture is incredibly important in stamping out bullying, but so too is the community approach. I'm conscious that during this lecture I have not spent much time on conventional educational matters. That is because there is a wide body of excellent literature on learning and teaching to which you already have access, and besides which, I'm not a professional educationist. During my time as Shadow Minister and then Minister for Education and Skills, nearly 8 years in all, I realised that every person who has ever gone to school regards themselves as an expert in education. If, like me, they have sent children to school, then they're at least entitled to a PhD. This is not the experience of most other professions or trades. And it is again another exceptionally strong quiver in the bow of arrows for people who are involved in education. Let me end on a personal note. I was lucky growing up in Ireland in the 1950s and 60s. My father was a grocer, a successful shopkeeper, as was his father before him. Both my parents had a respect for education and a love of learning. They managed to send their 6 children, my sister and 4 brothers, through school and on to university. We were the first generation to do so, like so many others at the same time in Ireland. My sister and my 2 brothers had left home when I had started studying architecture, and I had the large attic bedroom in the top of the house with plenty of space to lay out my drawings. Many evenings when he came home from work, My father would come up the stairs into the bedroom to see how the drawings and more or less find out how I was getting on. One evening, I confessed that I was finding chemistry extremely difficult, particularly the periodic table, which I had just about mastered but could not understand. I was simply forcing myself to learn it off by rote. He turned to me and said, "Rory, no matter how hard, stick with it. Remember, no recession, no bank, no single person can ever take back from you a qualification and a skill that you get from education. You will have it for the rest of your life." Richard Kapuscinski, were he alive today, would not be surprised at the level of political upheaval and unrest in the world. He had, after all, lived through so much of it himself. What he would be new to him now today, as I see it, is the instant media coverage of horrendous events of disruption, brutality, and even willful cruelty. Those who survive, particularly families and young children, have lost their education years and can never regain them again in real time. Education 2030 must begin to explore ways in which those young people who have lost their natural education years are given a space and time to find it. Thank you very much indeed.
Well, good evening, everybody. My name is Lorenzo Fioramonti. I'm a professor of political economy at this university, and I'm the president of the European Union Studies Association of Sub-Saharan Africa, and I have the honor of moderating what now looks like a very short Q&A, although I presume we can probably stretch it a little bit, especially if your questions are really riveting and short, and let's see how heated the debate gets, and then I'm going to look for a hint from the organizers to let me know when we need to close. I see one hand in the back. Please.
Hi, Irma Elof, Dean of Education, University of Pretoria. I have a question about teachers of teachers. In the literature, specifically around SDG 4, there seems to be an emerging discourse that we need to pay more attention to the quality of those who are teaching the teachers of the future. What's your thoughts on that? Any one of the two former ministers may answer.
Let's see if there's another question, otherwise I'm going to hand it over back to the speakers. Okay, let's start warming up with one question. I'm sure there's going to be many more, just need a bit of, input.
There is currently a worldwide shortage of English language primary school teachers. Different reasons for that. The anglicisation of different aspects of trade worldwide have produced that demand of the number of people wanting to learn English. We've had difficulties in Ireland keeping young teachers in Ireland who want to go abroad to work. They're well paid in Ireland, and we have succeeded in the last 5 years in ensuring that no unqualified teacher can get paid in an Irish classroom. State pays the salaries of 99.9% of all primary school teachers, and to get into the classroom you have to be qualified.
Je voudrais juste apporter un exemple de mon pays en Haïti.
I would like just to give an example of my country, Haiti.
85% des enseignants en salle de classe n'ont pas toutes les qualifications pour être en salle de classe.
85% of the teachers have not the qualification to be in the classroom.
Et il y a une des grandes difficultés à aussi avoir avec la langue d'enseignement.
One of the big difficulties is about the language of teaching.
La grande majorité des ressources didactiques pédagogiques dont nous disposons sont en français.
The majority of the material didactic and pedagogic are in French.
Et il y a très peu d'enseignements professionnellement faits en français. Et il y a très peu d'enseignants qui parlent et écrivent correctement le français.
And there are so few teachers who are speaking well French or writing well in French.
Dès le départ, il y a un grand blocage même pour la formation des enseignants.
There is a big block on the teacher training.
Donc, je sais que dans beaucoup de pays en Afrique, on a les mêmes difficultés d'enseignement de base, surtout les premières années, quant à la langue maternelle, mais c'est un défi important pour tous les systèmes éducatifs.
There's the same difficulties in several countries in Africa in basic education with that language, so we have to deal with that.
So I see two more hands. We start at the back and then here at the second row. Please click on the button and introduce yourselves. Is there a third hand? There, the lady there.
Okay, I'm Modo from the Department of Music in the University of Pretoria, a postgraduate student. My question is directed to Mr. Quinn. You alluded to the fact that in Ireland, this vandalized school is a rare sight. We live in the part of the world this side where schools are always a target of anger. Whenever people are angry, they vandalize schools and so forth. So what lesson can we learn from you, or what attributes to that kind of treating school in a sacred manner? Thank you.
So let's take also the other two questions.
My name is Curtis Richardson. I'm a student here at the University of Pretoria. I'd like to thank basically everybody involved for the opportunity to take part in such a discussion. I wanted to discuss from particularly a youth perspective the emphasis and focus placed on education internationally. Now, both speakers mentioned, of course, Mr. Quinn mentioning the fact of the kind of resistance you meet when trying to make progress in education. And Mr. Manigat mentioning the fact that sometimes investment is only focused on basic education as a focus in developing education. Now, with more and more research proving that most of the economic growth, sustainably at least, is being found in heavy investment into education and trying to formulate long-lasting education. How is it then that we fight this almost stagnancy when it comes to the understanding of change that needs to happen in education, especially in the developing world where a lot of the education seems to be well, at least perceived as conflicting with the understanding of the people as a culture or as an identity. So they would rather place economic investments such as infrastructure ahead of that in education because it does not interfere with cultural understandings or cultural things, practice.
Good evening. Maurice Kuman, Department of Basic Education. Both speakers mentioned the critical need to transform our education systems to give a bigger emphasis on vocational education. I'd like to hear from the speakers what kind of examples can you give of how countries transform their total education system towards this, given the big investment that's required, the huge cost for vocational education, the extreme need to retrain teachers and also transform your current institutions to be equipped to provide vocational education. I know that Germany has a long tradition, but if you come from a very low base, and especially in the developing world, how do you think that can be achieved more effectively?
Merci pour ces deux questions. Je commence par la dernière avant de revenir sur la question sur l'éducation primaire, sur la formation professionnelle. Je pense que dans beaucoup de pays, le premier blocage sur la formation technique et professionnelle vient aussi de l'image qu'on a de la formation technique et professionnelle.
So I think thank you for the questions. The first thing I see is that for the TVET, the first problem is really the representation we have about that.
Dans mon pays, on dit souvent quand vous n'êtes pas intelligent, quelques parents le disent, quand vous n'êtes pas intelligent ou quand vous ne réussissez pas à l'école, allez apprendre un métier à l'école professionnelle.
Yes, there is this image in my country that if you are not clever, if you cannot success at school, then you go to the professional training.
Donc, déjà, il y a un défi de changer la représentation qu'on a de l'école professionnelle. Et la deuxième chose que les pays se doivent de faire, c'est effectivement apporter de la valeur à ces différents métiers.
So the first challenge is to change that representation, and then it's to bring new value to this professional training.
Mais il y a beaucoup d'aspects, mais je voudrais seulement en prendre un qui est important.
There are several aspects, but I would like to highlight only one.
Les écoles professionnelles classiques dans beaucoup de pays, ont très peu de moyens, très peu d'équipements et même d'outils pédagogiques pour graduer les élèves.
So usually in the school for professional training, there are not a lot of material, basic material to work well there.
Et on n'est pas obligé de faire des écoles professionnelles techniques qui coûtent des millions de dollars ou d'euros.
But however, we are not obliged to have a lot of money for that schools. It should be not so expensive.
C'est pourquoi moi je veux proposer une réflexion que beaucoup de pays engagent aujourd'hui. C'est comment construire autour des acquis que beaucoup de jeunes ont déjà dans leur propre environnement, avec leurs propres outils de travail.
So I would like to think about a new way, a new reflection, how to build on what the students have already built on that.
Cette révolution dont on parle au niveau de l'école de l'investissement dans le secondaire, de la formation professionnelle, ne doivent pas se voir comme les millions d'investissements qu'on a fait pour construire des écoles primaires.
It's not the same thing. This investment should be understood in another way, that when we invest in the primary school or in the basic school, it's another investment.
Ça prend des systèmes plus souples, des systèmes de certification plus souples, des modèles d'apprentissage moins rigides et qui coûtent moins cher. Sinon, on n'aura ni le temps, ni l'argent nécessaire, surtout dans les pays en développement, pour multiplier des millions d'écoles professionnelles et avoir les enseignants qualifiés qu'il faut.
So this certification should be more flexible, less cost, and then we have to really think about this flexibility, not to spend too many money there.
Et pour terminer sur cette question, j'ai un collègue qui est dans la salle et qui promeut un projet très important, c'est comment arriver à reconnaître les compétences de beaucoup de jeunes qui n'ont pas été dans une école professionnelle formelle, mais comment on peut certifier ces compétences pour que ces jeunes rentrent sur le marché du travail.
So we have to find new way, and we have a colleague here in the room who work on the way to find new ways on how to build, on how to recognize the skills for the one who are not in the classical system, how to build on that.
Et pour la question relative à... C'est vrai que ce qu'on a dit, c'est que depuis la conférence de Jomtien et de Dakar, pour les pays en développement, il y a un choix qui a été fait d'investir massivement dans l'école primaire.
So this is true that since Dakar and Johnson, we invest in basic education.
J'ai été ministre de l'Éducation pendant 2 ans.
I was Minister for Education during 2 years.
Je dois dire que dans mon pays, on a une vingtaine de bailleurs de fonds qui sont présents dans l'Union européenne.
So in my country, there are around 20 donors from the European Union.
Mais il y a un grand courant d'idées qui est de dire il faut commencer par le commencement. On n'investit que dans l'école primaire. Il y a très peu de financement dédié pour des jeunes entre 15 et 24 ans d'appui direct pour la formation, ou formelle ou non formelle.
So there is a trend saying that yes, we have to invest really in basic education, and there is not a lot of opportunity for people from 15 to 24. There is no direct funding for that.
Même s'il y a un effort qui est fait pour la formation des enseignants au niveau universitaire et au niveau de formation professionnelle.
Despite the efforts done for the teacher trainings, for the professional training.
Je suis heureux de voir que des jeunes agitent ce débat parce que je dois dire que au niveau des politiques,
On a beaucoup de difficultés à mettre ce sujet sur la table.
This is a good news that young people raise this debate because it's a few politicians doing that.
Okay, thank you. To the question, sir, up at the top, what happens when the school gets vandalized? I think it goes back to the point I made where the community would put such a value on a building in my country, and I suspect in yours. It used to be a graveyard or a church. These were sacred places where the dead were buried, or which reflected religious belief, and they were not vandalized. But a school, in a strange sort of way, has to be given nearly that kind of status, so that it is not, vandalism is not a nice thing to begin with. But I think they should. That's where your granny learned to school, that's where your children will go to school, that's where you learn to be in school itself. If you can make that happen, now in some environments I know that's extremely difficult, but it is, if they respect it, and if they've got tangible reasons for respecting it, the likelihood of its being vandalized will be diminished. Won't rule it out. With regards to the traditional school, or the young woman's question, where is she? Yeah, thanks. Education has been very sexist from the time that books were printed. And that's going back 500 years. I'm speaking about books being printed in Europe. And it was an all-male pursuit, an all-male exercise. And okay, girls did learn to read, and they were reading differently, etc. But there wasn't really, with very few exceptions, the shared experience of both young men and young women learning to read together, let alone learning to do things together. And modern employers want young people coming into the workforce who are actually able to work together. And for males and females to work together, well, the only time they were ever working together was when they were trying to get close to each other for other reasons that had nothing to do with education except their own. There was a different attitude. So I would say, for example, working with your hands, learning how to do things. Let, somebody, the boys and the girls, the choice would be their own. They either bring in a hairdryer that doesn't work, or a Black & Decker that's broken, or some piece of mechanical machinery that is used in the household that they have to work at, because the cost of repairing these things is enormous, and quite frequently it's very simple to fix. But the point I'm making, self-evidently, is that if they do things together, they learn together. And sometimes people then believe that male hands are very clumsy, very strong, and female hands are very delicate and can extricate bits and pieces that clunky male hands can't do it. And the final point for all of that is that's where most workplaces now, with very few exceptions, certainly in the developed world, are mixed workplaces. And there's still a lot of hassle in those mixed working places, from inappropriate behavior and from harassment of one kind or another. We're constantly reading about it. That's because they're not used to actually working together until much later in their lives, and when they haven't built up a level of intolerance for that kind of inappropriate behavior. And the final point, by way of, well, why doesn't this happen, is because parents want their children to get good exam results in their critical exams, particularly their final second level school exam. And schools want to get the reputation of being a school which gets good results from their pupils. And some of the activities that I'm talking about are much more difficult to measure and mark than they are group work. And that's where in the Republic of Ireland we're getting resistance from teachers at teaching 15-year-old boys and girls to do group work and critical thinking and presentation and all of that. But it will change because it is the way forward. But change doesn't happen because people wake up in the morning and say, hey guys, let's have a new idea, let's do this. It changes because there are people relentlessly knocking on the door in different fora and in different ways, saying this can change and it can be better, and it will be better.
So on this note, actually looking at the time, on this note and on a beautiful note, like change can happen. and keep knocking on doors in South Africa and elsewhere, including the door of this room that is separating us from our reception. So I'd like to ask you to join me in thanking the speakers for their presentations.